Hello and welcome to today's Movers and Shakers virtual event. My name is Lena Tasha Salter and I'm Managing Director of Movers and Shakers. I hope you're all having a really good week. So today's event is on the creative estuary, developing the world's most exciting creative cluster. And it's going to be focusing on how cultural co-location is shaping the cultural regeneration in the Thames Estuary. Now, we're delighted to have this event in partnership with Creative Estuary. I'm sure many of you know who they are, but if you don't, the Creative Estuary actually spans from Southend to Margate. It's part of the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. It uses culture as a catalyst for growth, and it's unlocking the area as a potential international cultural hubs. Absolutely fascinating. And the area is attracting a lot of creative businesses and creative individuals. It was actually awarded £4.3 million in 2019 as one of the 5 projects receiving the Cultural Development Fund. And there's lots of benefits that are going to come to fruition for the whole wider area around the creative estuary because of these products. Now I'm going to let our panel talk to you more about this because we've put together an expert lineup of contributors, can tell you all about the creative estuary, what's going to happen and their part in it. So we welcome today our guest chair, who's once again Max Farrell, the CEO and founder of the London Collective. Thank you for him for joining and collaborating on today's event. Welcome to Ray Meir, who is a non-exec board member for the Thames Estuary Growth Board. He's also a music producer. Lisa Dee, who is the head of film at the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. Sarah Dance, who's the chair of the Creative Estuary. Laura Bailey, who is cultural development manager at the Ebbsfleet Garden City, and Ken Deitor, who is a non-exec board member for the Thames Estuary Growth Board as well. He's also the lead for the board on inward investment at Purfleet Centre Regeneration. So a truly expert panel who will tell us all we need to know and answer our questions. So how it's going to work today is I'm going to hand over in a few minutes to Max, and then we'll hear from each of the contributors who will share some slides and explain their role in the exciting project. We'll then come together and have a discussion session. And don't forget, you can ask questions in the normal way. So do type in your questions, do have a think about what you want to know, and Max will try to facilitate as many of these as he possibly can. So really hoping you enjoy today's event, and please do feedback from the platform, your experiences. I know we've got a number of members on today's event, but we've actually got also a number of newcomers. So really interesting to hear your feedback on the platform and your experiences. Don't forget to network while you're on today, because there's lots of opportunities to connect with our members, to watch back some of our past events on demand. I think we've got 55 plus hours on there now for you all, and have a look at our knowledge hubs. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Max to facilitate the rest of today's event. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a really good morning and enjoy.
Good morning. Thanks, Lee, and good morning, everybody. My name is Max Farrell. As Lee mentioned, I'm the founder of the London Collective. We're a group of built environment experts and creatives, and we come together to collaborate on projects. And I'm very excited to be involved in this event today. We've got a great lineup of speakers and a really important topic to discuss. I suppose the first thing to say is that the reason that we're having this event on this date is that it coincides with another part of the Creative Estuary project, which is the Estuary 2021 Festival, which is a large-scale arts festival. If you haven't already been involved, then do check it out. It's going on until Sunday, and there's lots of events and activities, including a curated walk along the coast of South Essex and North Kent with contemporary artworks and performances. So do have a look at the website and get involved if you haven't already. Some fantastic things to see and do. So the Creative Estuary as a project, we're very lucky to have Sarah Dance here today, who's the chair, and she'll tell you more about it. And it involves a number of different advisory groups, one of which I chair, which is looking at cultural co-location, which is the focus of the talk today. And really what that's about is about integrating, looking at ways to integrate space for creative activities. And that can range from flexible artist studios to performance spaces, and looking at mixed use buildings and their viability, but also how they create value. And we have a great panel as part of our co-location advisory group. We have people from MHCLG, central government, the GLA, cultural team, mixed use developers like First Base and Lendlease, and housing associations like Clarion, and also Barking and Dagenham film, and we have Lisa D on the panel today, and we'll hear lots more from her, and also from the two pilot projects, and those are the projects that we're looking at in some detail, which is Ebbsfleet, Garden City, and Purfleet in Thurrock, and we're going to hear from them too. So I'm looking forward to that, and I won't take up much more time in the introduction than to say a big thank you to the project director of Creative Estuary, Emma Wilcox, to Samir Begen from Kent University, and also Jennifer Yard at the marketing team, who's done a great job putting this together, the event today. So I'm going to hand over now to Sarah, who I think is the first speaker, and each of the panel members is going to do a short presentation, about 8 minutes each, and then we'll open up to discussion and Q&A. So I'll hand over to Sarah first. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Max, and it's great to see you all today. As Max explained, I'm Sarah Dance. I'm chair of Creative Estuary, and for my sins, I'm also deputy chair of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership and co-chair of the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. So first of all, I'd like to show you a very short film, which hopefully sets the scene for Creative Estuary and should give you a kind of sense of our vision and our hopes, and of course, most importantly, our ambition. So we'll play the film now. Thank you.
The Thames Estuary is poised to become one of the most exciting cultural hubs in the world. Across Essex and Kent from Southend to Margate, the Thames Estuary has untold creative potential. Creative Estuary will drive forward its creative and economic evolution as an international production hub and a collaborative, inspirational working space for a new generation of creative talent. Our aim is to use culture as the catalyst for growth, helping build a place for creative individuals and businesses to work, collaborate and grow. Our story is one of a unique place formed over centuries by land and water. It is where the river meets the sea, a place of production with an industrial legacy and a distinctively creative spirit. It has a long heritage as a maritime thoroughfare, with historic settlements and extraordinary stories. It is here that we are building a future based on creative energy and innovation that inspires investment, enterprise and productivity, a place that will grow and prosper for generations to come. The estuary, with its wide open spaces, vast skies and distant views, ignites the imagination. It is home to local communities that reflect the estuary's diversity, resilience and adaptability, sometimes radical, often provocative, always inquisitive. Although our ideas may be different and our spaces constantly evolving, we work together to create, to share cultural experiences and to enjoy and sustain our naturally rich and wild places. Creative Estuary, a good place for making.
So Creative Estuary, as Lee said earlier, is part of the wider Thames Estuary Production Corridor. And we've been funded through the Cultural Development Fund by the DCMS, and we're led by the University of Kent on behalf of the consortium of public sector and cultural organisations. So we have funding for just 4 short years to kickstart this vision as part of the 30-year strategy for the region. And our work really marks a new approach to culture and creative investment. and it's focusing on geographical location and the effect that strategic investment can have on the economic growth and productivity of an area. So through this project, we will give people access to excellent quality art by commissioning new creative talent that attracts new audience and participants. And we've heard just earlier from Max about Estuary 2021 Festival. We'll develop and promote a shared identity for the Thames Estuary, making it one of the most attractive locations for creative businesses to work, to collaborate and to grow. And we want to create sustainable workspaces that support people and networks needed to embed creative industries in the region. And obviously we want to embed arts and culture into the design and function of new developments and public spaces, and you'll hear more about that later today. And we of course want to champion the next generation of creative talent and future leaders, because without that we're nothing. So we're going to be providing mentoring, training and access to aspirational projects and opportunities. And of course, we want to learn from and share with programmes across the UK and internationally in order to really strengthen local leadership and expertise and our knowledge. So why Creative Estuary and why now? Well, the Estuary has a really established creative cultural ecosystem. It's home, as you can see on a couple of images here, to the national and internationally important centres of creative production. And it has also really vibrant clusters of creative makers and producers. And as you saw on the film, a diverse network of places which are defined by their distinctive creative and cultural offerings. So we have flagship projects such as Turner Contemporary that you can see on the slide here, and High House Production Park. Both have created a real spark for change. And so we're going to learn from and build upon their successes. Creative Estuary, as you know, covers a large geography, but the area has a large proportion of small creative clusters. And importantly, research into clusters of specialist industries has consistently shown the benefits to economic growth and indeed to greater innovation. Often this is sort of focused on a city scale, but actually recent findings by the Policy and Evidence Centre has demonstrated that there is a compelling impact of microclusters, which they describe as small engines of growth. And so we also know from previous research that companies in creative clusters benefit from access to skills, to knowledge, to customers, and lifestyle and amenities. So companies in microclusters, wherever they are, they get a lot of their ideas, all of the evidence has shown, from within their town or their city or their village, and actually often within a 20-minute walk of their office. So we believe that these small clusters represent a real opportunity for building economic resilience across the UK, and they need to be supported as the government seeks to level up across the UK's regions. And of course, a place is only attractive if you have fantastic arts and culture, and that it's embedded into the design and the development and the DNA of our communities. And that's fundamental to the Thames Estuary's future. So that's why we're embarking on this ambitious project to establish best practice in ensuring arts and culture play a key role in civic planning and placemaking. Cultural co-location involves really finding holistic ways to integrate cultural infrastructure into community buildings and into our outdoor spaces, which facilitates more places for creative activity, whether that be from flexible artist studios to larger scale performance and exhibition spaces. So our research and innovation will allow us to create a new strategy for embedding culture into our new communities along the Thames Estuary, about developing best practice models with national relevance, and of course, importantly, creating a project legacy. So there are two areas that you're going to hear more about today in the Thames Estuary region, which are piloting the cultural co-location, and that's Ebbsfleet Garden City and a major regeneration scheme, Purfleet on Thames. And you'll hear more about these shortly from Laura and Ken. So throughout the time I've been speaking just now, you've heard me mention ambition a lot. And it's a phrase it's a word I use a lot in every time I talk about things. But equally important when we're working on a project that is as complex and as challenging as this, is partnerships. So we're really pleased that through Creative Estuary, we're building new partnerships and strengthening existing ones. And we'd love you to join us on that journey. I really believe that we are stronger together. We are smarter if we work together closely. And of course, ultimately, we will be more successful if we work closer together. And talking of great partners, I'm going to now hand over to Ken, who's going to talk to you a little bit more.
Thank you, Sarah. That was unbelievable. I love the film. It just excites me so much. And it's one of the reasons I love property development, is that using culture and creative industries and heritage to drive forward schemes. And I would go further than saying we should be embedding creative industries in our schemes. My own view is that it should be leading from the front, and I've always felt that. In my role as Urban Catalyst, we did the Bermondsey Square development, and one of the first things we did was we brought in Shortwave Films, who were a local film production training facility, and it just created so much energy in the community. And then I also at the same time was chair of Rivington Place for the wonderful and sadly departed Stuart Hall, where we worked with Innova and Autograph, the Black artists, photographers, and that was one of the great drivers in the changes that came through in Shoreditch. What the picture you see here is of the to be accomplished Purfleet Centre, where we've already started work last month. Next, please. And this also shows in the picture of this is the overall Purfleet Centre regeneration. It's almost 150 acres. It's 1 kilometre of river frontage, which we really want to open up. We're taking a healthy living agenda for the whole scheme. We have our own railway station there. It's 27 minutes into Fenchurch Street, but we want to make this a healthy community, and the creative community is at the heart of all that. And those large boxes, and they won't be built as large boxes like that, is where we have consent for our film and TV studios and creative studios, which is at the heart of where we're driving forward. But we're also building 2,800 homes. The first one's already started on site. We're building a new railway station, as you've seen from the previous shot, an integrated medical centre, new primary school, secondary school has already been built, and new retail. And overall, we're going to be creating jobs, employment, and actually picking up on Sarah's point, creating ambition. And that's something that the local community we wanted to do. Next, please. We undertook an extensive placemaking engagement process, and this doesn't even reflect the full nature of it, but it gives you a flavour. And at the very beginning, our transformational architect for our scheme was, again, the sadly departed Will Alsop, who was just exceptional at breaking down barriers. And what we wanted to do was break down barriers and actually open up to the community. And we had a series of meetings with the community, sections of the community, to find out what they wanted. I also remember one of the strongest points was we had a session for the young kids that of the local Garrison estate. They came in and we said, what's life like here? And they said, we're bored. And so we talked it through with them, and they said, actually, what we'd really like to do is do stuff around photography. We would like to, and it was very interesting. As we got into talking to them, Will was fantastic at this, that there became a real vision coming through about the creative industries, actually going down to that level where kids sitting on the street were bored. Actually, that excited them. Next, please. So we started working with Thurrock Council and other government bodies and therefore became part of the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. Now, I'm just the warm-up act for Ray Meir. He's the expert in the creative industries at the Thames Estuary Growth Board. My role is as head of inward investment into the Thames Estuary. And one of the things that really excites me, and I think actually excites people around the world, and we talk globally now we're working very closely with DIT and other government bodies to sell the story of the Thames Estuary, is that people like the culture, they like the heritage that we create here in Britain. I get very excited about this, and I think that what we're creating here in the Thames Estuary is something that we should be very proud of. Next. When I came to look at the future of what I could deliver on the site at Purfleet overall, this 150 acres development, it already had the High House Production Park. And I remember going down with Will Alsop and also with Paul Monaghan, AHMM, our master planners, and we looked at the existing facilities here of the Royal Opera House and the Backstage Centre. It's a little gem. It's more than little. It's a big gem. It's phenomenal. It's fully booked up by the media industry at the moment. And we thought, actually, this is a fantastic basis on which to build our scheme. So that's what actually drove us to start thinking about actually what could we do in terms of the overall scheme as a driver, rather than just build houses. How do we build jobs? How do we create that ambition that Sarah mentioned? Next, please. So we started and I started talking to people in the film and TV industry, and they said, actually, there's a real demand for film and TV. So we started about creating a new facility at Purfleet that will actually sit alongside the existing Backstage Centre. The picture that you see here is of the Backstage Centre. It's an amazing facility, but we're going to be building 11 bigger versions of this and variations of that. But actually, what we're also looking at very carefully at and working with people like Ray Meir is actually what does the future look like for the creative industries? Looking at actually the LED sound stages, XR labs, etc. And next, please. So taking that forward, we're starting to now look at very closely at how entertainment impacts into our scheme. I've always been a great believer of arts and culture and embedding that into our schemes. But actually, what we're doing here is something that's very, very, very exciting. And we're looking at actually how do we work as part of the overall Thames Estuary production corridor. And we're really happy that localities such as Dagenham are actually producing their own studios. We don't see that as competition. We think this is great. This is actually sells us, because when we're out talking, I can say this as actually leading on inward investment of the Thames Estuary Growth Board, this is what countries around the world, investors around the world, sovereign wealth funds want to see. They want to find critical mass. And actually what we're creating now in the Thames Estuary production corridor alone is an amazing critical mass for inward investment into what we're achieving. So it's also a great leveler of what's happening in the UK generally. I'm a great believer in UK PLC, and I'm a great believer therefore in actually, if we're successful in the Thames Estuary production corridor, this is going to flow through into the rest of the country to great success. So this is just a snapshot of what we're doing at Purfleet. As I said, we're building homes, we're building jobs, we're building health, education, and so forth. But this is the start of something that's really meaningful. And you're welcome to come and join us. Next, please. Just my final slide, just to show this is who we are. You can see what we're doing at Purfleet on our Purfleet.com, and we're happy to talk to anyone and happy to engage with ideas, because harnessing ideas is the way forward. And let's take that ambition to another level. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time, Lee.
Okay, so I'm Laura Bailey, and I am the Cultural Development Manager for Estuary Garden City, working with Estuary Development Corporation, and it's great to have this opportunity to talk about cultural co-location work at Estuary Garden City. So next slide, please. So we are the first of a new generation of garden settlements and new towns, and we feel like this is a great opportunity to ask, what does this mean today, and how can we learn from others and our own experience to create a great place? I'm sure most of you will know a lot about Estuary Garden City, but just briefly, we are a brownfield site. which includes the Swanscombe Peninsula, which is the site of the proposed London Resort theme park. We have quite a complicated situation here, in that we've inherited lots of existing planning permissions before the Garden City was even thought of, and with that comes requirements from developers which are not necessarily fit for today. And there was certainly no consideration of culture or cultural infrastructure in that. But there's lots of opportunities to influence and to drive ambition and quality, in particular on lands that we are buying or that we have bought, such as the land around Estuary International Station and pockets of employment land, for example. And we're looking to develop a whole place approach and embed co-production, co-design and co-location into the DNA of the place, and also to plan for a sustainable legacy through a Garden City Trust. Next, please. So in order to ensure a whole place approach, in 2018-2019, Ebbsfleet Development Corporation commissioned a suite of strategies and studies, including culture, inclusive growth, civic infrastructure, education, sport, and so on. Now, the fundamental drive of our culture strategy is about arts and culture being accessible for everyone. So to achieve this, we have developed 3 key priorities that you can see here on the screen. And our inclusive growth approach is about making sure that economic growth and jobs in this area are inclusive and available for local people, and therefore addressing any barriers to people getting jobs, such as low skills and health issues, for example. And Ebbsfleet is situated in a strategic location at the heart of the Thames Estuary production corridor, and so we have an ambition for some of these skills and jobs to be in the cultural and creative industries. Next slide, please. So why cultural co-location? Well, the idea is to co-locate culture and arts facilities at a range of scales right across the city within some of our planned buildings and spaces, including Meanwhile, which enables this vision for arts and culture for everybody. It's about the ability for culture and creativity to positively contribute to other agendas, such as health and education, and the impact of creativity on quality of life. At the city level, we want to open up opportunities for the cultural and creative industries to grow in this area. So our approach is really embracing the whole spectrum, from grassroots community arts right through to the creative industries, through production spaces, performance spaces, large and small. Next slide, please. So investment and involvement from Creative Estuary is enabling us to work specifically on 2 of our neighbourhoods in depth, in terms of looking at what cultural and creative spaces are needed and at what scale, and to co-design 2 specific buildings to RIBA Stage 2. It's also enabling a Meanwhile study of the whole Garden City and a Meanwhile feasibility study for a site that we own next to Northfleet Station. We have a strong focus on creative well-being and thinking about our new health and wellbeing hub and a preventative health agenda, which follows on from our work as a national Healthy Newtown pilot with the NHS. It's also supporting our community-led programming approach. But more broadly, it's enabling us to establish need and demand, to embed a co-design approach to all of our buildings, and to drive quality and helping shape our stewardship approach. Investment from Creative Estuary has opened up many conversations and opportunities that may not have been there otherwise, or may have been more difficult to get involved with, and it's already further increased the investment towards cultural infrastructure at Ebbsfleet. Next slide, please. So in terms of learning so far, it's early days, and as you all know, when you're in the thick of a big project, it can be hard to find the time to reflect, and we have still got a really long way to go. However, what we do know is, and this reflects on what Sarah was saying earlier about partnerships, we feel like partnerships are really valuable and fundamental to what we do in order to drive innovation and change. No one person or organisation has all the knowledge or experience or ideas or solutions. Bringing communities on the journey and allowing them a genuine voice is so important. Money, investment, it goes without saying, open doors. Even small amounts of investment can make a big difference. But if the government or investors or developers or local authorities are serious about the creative economy and harnessing the impact of culture, they need to keep investing and prioritising it. The question is, where will investment come from beyond funded programmes like this? How can we get better contributions from developers towards things like culture, for example? We also believe that innovation is fundamental. We don't necessarily know how to build the best cities of the future. We can learn from the past, good and bad, but unless we can try things differently, we could just end up with more of the same and more mediocre. And it takes time to develop an approach that everybody is signed up to. In our case, our board, directors, officers, developers, other stakeholders, everybody needs to come on that journey. 3 years ago, there was no consideration of culture at Estuary, and now it's been embedded across the city. And we've secured around £1.2 million so far towards cultural infrastructure and programming from a range of sources. And as you can see from this slide, we have really strong ambitions and long-term plans. So sometimes it can feel like an uphill struggle, but the outcomes and the impact can be phenomenal. Thank you.
Firstly, I wanted to say thank you to Sarah, to Ken and to Laura for their presentations. Before I go into my 8 minutes, my allotted 8 minutes, I'm going to just let you all know that certainly what I'm going to be referring to is a couple of steps back from the specificity of what Laura and Ken were referring to. So let me just move too fast. There we go. Right. Little intro about me. My name's Ray Meir. I'm a music producer and a sound designer. I'm also an audio tech entrepreneur. I own and operate my own record label up in Liverpool, but I live in the Thames Estuary area. I actually studied at the University of Kent many moons ago. I have a bunch of studio mix rooms up in Liverpool, specializing in immersive audio. I also have 2 out in Ojai, which is about 45 minutes east of Santa Barbara. We primarily do work for Apple TV Plus, Netflix, and Amazon Studios. I'm the founder of Record.xyz, which is a recording studio in your pocket, former EVP of Universal Music Group. I was a channel head for about 18 plus television channels in the UK and US. And in another former life, I was a producer for the United Nations at the New York Secretariat. I'm on this call, on this panel. Thank you for the invite, Emma, from the Creative Estuary, because I'm a Creative Estuary champion. I'm also on the board with Ken of the Thames Estuary Growth Board, and I am the Thames Estuary Growth Board's lead on digital and also the creative sector, specifically the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. You've heard a little bit, I'm sorry about the blurry picture here, you've heard a little bit about geography of the Creative Estuary, as well as the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. This is a map that comes out of the Thames Estuary Growth Board that highlights the geographic location and also local authority jurisdiction, because you can see there's a fair amount of detail and a huge amount of complexity at the local authority level, and a huge amount of remit and process and thinking that has gone behind the Growth Board. So let me talk a little bit about the creative industries from the Growth Board perspective. We have a green-blue plan, which feeds into a lot of what Ken was talking about. And absolutely, we're aligning with Sarah regarding, and Emma, on the Creative Estuary front, as well as the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. A lot of words here, but let me just blow through it. We're a champion of the Arts Council's Let's Create agenda, which is a DCMS-backed plan to create this production corridor. You've heard reference to the production corridor from Sarah, as well as Ken. And this is all about creating the UK's largest creative industry sector, 50,000 jobs on the ground and generating an additional £3.7 billion into the UK economy, essentially making the Thames Estuary Production Corridor the UK's largest concentration of creative activity. One of the areas that you've heard me refer to that I'm leading on with the TGB is digital. And so we're currently conducting a needs state assessment of the entire geography in terms of its digital capability, commercially as well as in the community. And that's working throughout 20 local authorities that constitute the estuaries board in terms of the public sector. We're currently putting together a report that we'll be publishing of a multi-phased approach to making the Thames Estuary the #1 digital infrastructure in the world. That's our goal. And this is all about inward investment, and it's one that will absolutely support economic growth and social levelling up in the creative industries primarily, but there is a huge number of secondary and tertiary benefits to this kind of planning, not just in terms of raising money from the private sector, but also from public sector funding as well. So there is a published report that we'll be putting out that we've been working on for the last 3-4 months that will lead to a request for information and a request for a proposal. This is about boots on the ground. This isn't just a plan that's talking about the potential for digital drivers in the area. This is very much moving into inward investment and actually putting in the infrastructure. So this is the seeds of that. Sorry, I'm going too fast. There we go. The creative estuary. Well, what's the ambition beyond the production corridor and delving a little bit deeper? You've heard Tal about what the creative industries is to placemaking. Let me re-underline all of that. The creative industries is the fastest growing sector in the Thames Estuary region. It is integral to place building. You've heard Laura refer to that regarding Ebbsfleet and Ken regarding Purfleet. It is about industry-led skills training and driving growth. So the Growth Board absolutely recognises the Thames Estuary Production Corridor, and it aligns and is a cornerstone to the Growth Board's Green Blue Action Plan. The Growth Board is led by Kate, who's our estuary envoy, and she's the one who has gamely put together a private sector board as well as a public sector board. And so we have an ongoing commitment to support the creative estuary and the role that the Estuary Festival that Sarah referred to plays in creating this whole idea of distinction in the area and celebrating talent, which is fantastic, but we're looking also to put the infrastructure in to train the next generation at schooling level as well as at industry level, underpinned with a redefined digital plan. As you can see, digital investment is a priority. Moving on very swiftly in terms of what are the benefits for all of the things that we're talking to on this panel today. As a creative industry professional that works not just across the UK but globally, it's very important that I live and work where I live and work. Very important to me. I have the choice to live and work in many of the major media metropolises, but I've chosen to live and work in this area. My business may well be up in Liverpool, but because of a remote access, I am free to access all of my systems and all of my staff and all of my infrastructure because of digital capability that allows me to manage all of my affairs on the global level. But it is about place recognition. It's about inward investment. The digital play that we're making through the Growth Board is very much in coordination with Creative Estuary as well as the production corridor, is very much about how do we secure, multi-billion dollars worth of private sector investment as well as a publicly funded match funding. And it's about attracting, training and retaining talent. Very much so. As I mentioned, I trained in the area. I went to the University of Kent, and I'm one of those examples of individuals that have trained here and have come back here to live and work and bring up my family. It's drawing on a highly skilled workforce that's already here. This is not us imagining a landscape. There is a phenomenal workforce in this area that's already bleeding into central London and as well as globally. So it's about innovation and cross-pollination between different sectors. A number of the people on this panel I work quite closely with now on a number of fronts. These are varying different sectors working together on shared goals and objectives. And it's also looking at that post-COVID workforce in terms of environments and the psychology of work, place. Where do you live? Where do you want to bring up a family? So I've touched upon some very, very basic points. Hopefully in the panel discussion, we can drill down a little bit further, but that's me checking out. Thank you. And want to introduce our final speaker, who is Lisa D, I understand.
Hi, my name's Lisa D, and I'm the head of film LBBD, which is Barking and Dagenham's film office. So the picture you see here is Dagenham Studios, the CGI version of Dagenham Studios, which is going to be called Eastbridge Studios. I think I've put this on just 1 second. So for those of you that don't know where we are, I'm sure you do. We're Barking and Dagenham, heart of East London and Thames Estuary, 9 miles out of the centre of London, pretty well served by railway, water and all the other road networks. We've got some new emerging transport links, which we're really excited about. So the overground extension to Barking Riverside, and then the new Thames Clipper, which is going to open up the waterways as a commutable kind of transport hub for us. So yeah, we're really excited about these kind of new transport links, and our leader, Darren Rodwell, is very keen for the C2C line to stop at Dagenham East as part of that whole new regeneration piece, which I'll lead on to shortly. So just to give you a bit overview of the timeline for the film studios. So we launched the film office back in 2012. It was born out of an idea. We were one of the only film offices, one of boroughs in London not to have a film office. So I approached my director at the time and just said, could you give this to me as a kind of pilot scheme? And thankfully it worked out success, and I'm here speaking to you today. So kind of the last 5 to 6 years, I would say it's been exponential in terms of the level of productions we've got in. So kind of higher end kind of US productions for the Marvels and Sonys of this world, and all the kind of streamers like Netflix and Apple alike. So as part of that, there was a lot of demand for meanwhile use space in terms of set build space. So I approached the chief exec and the leader, Darren Rodwell, to talk about, is there spaces within the borough that we could perhaps explore for studio space. So as part of that we did a big feasibility study with the GLA, and it kind of then just kind of fed the opportunity in terms of there is demand, and it is a feasible option for us to kind of pursue this. So as part of that, the council purchased the former Sanofi site, which was a main Baker site in Dagenham East, which was used successfully as a kind of location-based filming, kept a lot of people with jobs while the space was out of use. So yeah, as a part of that, they then further kind of bought the rest of that land, which was about 23 acres in total. So the council committed to the design and the planning, which went through in 2019, and it was successfully granted in 2020. And Hackman Capital Partners and MBS were selected as our developer and operator. So why are we doing it? So it's going to deliver kind of up to about 12 stages, 3 acres of backlot, which is very much in need as part of kind of a studio space build, and all the ancillary space that goes with that, and office space, which is vitally important in order to be able to service a kind of a successful studio. So it's going to total to over 500,000 square feet. In addition to that, I haven't covered it in my slides, we have also committed to another studio, which is going to be in Barking. So Barking and Dagenham are going to have some studios. So there's going to be 6 sound stages that are going to be built there. It's an old site that we're converting. And it's going to be, again, MBS Hackman that will take that on, kind of working in tandem with the council. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stages in the borough, which is going to kind of feed into the whole tapestry of the Thames Estuary production corridor. Major employment boost for the borough, goes without saying, and the global impact. So kind of as was mentioned before, it's kind of like it's about us putting the borough, the Thames Estuary, this kind of whole kind of production corridor on the map, and it's already on the map. map. There's a lot of productions that are filming here. They know of the area, and they're really excited by the change, actually, because there's been so many productions that have happened kind of historically in the west of London, and there's a new gen that's kind of coming up, and really excited about kind of living close to where they work. So it's going to be a kind of a massive kind of change, and obviously perceptions of the borough is as kind of historically been around. Oh, sorry, something's coming up there. Has been a very industrial, low socioeconomic borough, and it's about kind of raising and driving aspiration of our community, and making sure that we kind of emboss that stamp of made in Dagenham. So there's some pride about kind of where things have been made, and we're a borough that's made things for years, whether that be cars, whether that be kind of fabrics, materials. It's all about kind of that kind of whole tapestry kind of growing as part of the borough's journey. So it's not just about kind of local spends and jobs. This opportunity is even bigger. So we're kind of very much anchored within the production corridor, and we see these studios as being that anchor industry, and then kind of leading along from the free mills that's already existing. And we're really excited about the new Perfleet studios, and it's all about being complementing and attracting kind of productions to base themselves in Sparrow and to really make it a home, and also to kind of bring in the creative industries that are already in the borough, or in the kind of production area. So it's about kind of making sure that we have that cross-pollination between education, industry, in-skill training, and just an opportunity to grow those supply chains and pipelines, and to scale that up. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of exciting projects that are going to go in around the studios. Just to kind of touch on some of the other stuff that's going on in the borough, lots of kind of homes being built around the Barking Riverside, the A13 tunnelling. So they kind of collectively are going to create over 20,000 homes, and then a massive regeneration happening down at Barking Town Centre, the Freeport proposal, the freight train to China, which our leader is very keen to make a commutable train within the next 5 to 10 years. But yeah, so really exciting. And then the wholesale markets, which then fills into that whole economic development pipeline around kind of the free markets, Billingsgate, Spitalfield, so fruit, fish and meat will all be coming into that borough. So that's going to create a whole new sector. And that will then kind of bleed into the creative industries, because they all need food. So it's about kind of that whole regeneration piece, and looking at it as a wider spectrum, rather than just kind of focusing on the studios themselves and how they all can kind of interlink. The Dagenham East, kind of zoning into Dagenham East in its the site where the Eastbrook studios are going to be built. There's a lot of other things that are going on in and around those studios. So we've got one of the most exciting buildings I think I've ever come across. So if any of you haven't had the chance yet, please do kind of look into UCL's Pearl building. So that's just completed, I think, in the last 4 weeks. I've had the pleasure of going there about 3 or 4 times. Any opportunity I get to, I'm going into that building. So they're gonna, it's all about behavioural sciences and how they kind of test how we walk through transport spaces. So they're going to have a fuselage which will be delivered there within the next year. I think they've got 7 trains, 2 carriages donated by TfL, and they're looking into things like where you position a kind of a train ticket barrier, how many people you'll be able to let through as a result of that, emergency situations, looking at COVID, air transfer, and also looking into things like space health. Like, I mean, it's just mind-blowing what they're doing there. So, and it is in itself a mini studio. So they can kind of take down sets, build sets. So it really kind of feeds in really well to the whole kind of Dagenham East collective. We've also got the data centres there, which has already gone up, and they're going to be building the next one very shortly. Eliotech Academy of Design and Engineering. So we've got our 16 to 18-year-olds doing lots of kind of design and carpentry. I've already slided onto my next one. So filming is already in the borough. So 2 of the biggest features, like I mentioned, were filmed just before COVID. So Marvel's Black Widow and the Sony Marvel's Morbius. So it's contributed to over 1.7 1.742 billion into UK investment. So year on year, we're looking at around 300 days of filming. During the pandemic, we were one of the first boroughs to get back in June. So we had some big streamers such as Apple TV and Batman. So they'll be coming out shortly. We've just appointed a new film sector lead. So their role will be to establish clear delivery pipelines in tandem with our education institutions. So we've got the Barking and Dagenham College, who are doing amazing stuff around immersive technology, virtual production, and all the kind of skills training that will help to kind of seed into the studios and the new sectors coming into the borough. We're doing some really minor things around a kind of pilot scheme for new college learners and local community members that want to get some on-set experience. So for the location-based filming side of things, we're able to give them opportunities to kind of get some runner work, do some marshalling work, and we're going to also get some training done with them towards the end of this month as well, so that they can kind of feel confident about the work they're doing. But it just gives them that on-set experience, gives them a credit, and hopefully kind of give them that opportunity to kind of want to do some more training or get involved with the industry. Just going to finish on this last quote, which I like to use. So Idris Elba is a massive advocate, as a lot of you may know, for East London, very much for, also because he went to college to Barking and Dagenham College as well. And he kind of mentioned something in one of our Teams calls, which really stuck with me, about untapped talent is everywhere and opportunity is not. So we want to be that change that we want to see. We want to make sure that the studios in this borough are representative of our community. So there's a lot of work to be able to, we need to put in to make that happen. As we know, 92% of the industry is underrepresented. So it's about kind of making sure they've got the training, they've got the opportunity, and it's making it happen. On that note, my slides have finished. So thank you very much for your time today. And I think we're going to lead into the questions shortly.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and that was really fascinating and amazing how much progress is being made there in Barking and Dagenham, and I know there's really strong leadership and a great vision, and I think we've heard from others too just this morning in terms of Ebbsfleet and also Ken at Purfleet around some great initiatives that are underway. And I think the important thing is that it's very joined up now, and there's a real sort of consensus and a commitment to make this happen. And you know, the ambition is there, and the name of the event is about can we transform the Thames Estuary into the world's most exciting creative hub, and that's no sort of limited ambition. So it does take everyone to play their part, and that involves the private sector, the public sector, working with local communities and existing businesses to make that happen. And I thought your last slide was really an important message about, you know, there's a huge amount of untapped potential. It's really about the opportunity. And I would now just like to invite the audience to ask any questions that they want to put to the panel. But it'd be good now that we have everyone on the screen if we perhaps have a discussion initially to kick that off. And I suppose just picking up on your last comments, Lisa, about the untapped potential and the need to create those opportunities. A critical element of that is around skills and people having the right sort of education and training in order to develop the skills to get involved in all the different elements and opportunities there are within the creative industries, because we've heard some incredible figures around the amount that the creative industries contribute to the UK economy. And you know, broadly speaking, there's everything from TV, radio, gaming, design, fashion, jewelry, architecture, and the performing arts. There's a huge amount of different opportunities. But you know, how do, if you're a child and you're going through school and you're in North Kent and South Essex at the moment, and maybe I'll put this to Sarah first, just to understand, because I know there is also a programme within Creative Estuaries that's about developing skills and working with universities and so on. as well as schools. So perhaps, Sarah, can you tell us a bit more about that, and how can we have the sort of the talent to deliver on these ambitions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to note that when we talk about talent as well, we're not just talking about young people. Actually, we're also talking about, you know, life, the whole life talent opportunity that actually the creative industries gives. And you know, through the Thames Estuary Production Corridor, we've got over 65 HE, higher education and further education institutes. So actually there's already an amazing base there, but I think it's also about thinking slightly out of the box on some of this. So within Creative Estuary, we've got a program called Regeneration 2031. And it's about looking at the creative skills of young people aged 16 to 25 years old in the less advantaged areas of North Kent and South Essex. And as you said, you know, that idea of talent being everywhere but opportunity not, that's really, really important. So we're looking at sort of awareness, first of all. You know, how do those young people, they might not traditionally think of themselves as working in the creative industry sector. It might be considered a slightly less stable kind of work opportunity in some ways, because lots of people who work, as I am, are freelancers who work in the creative sectors. So we're looking at sort of awareness and making the ideas of the careers more visible and more accessible. We're undertaking training and skills, ensuring that you know, looking at the areas of skills need. There are actually already in the creative industries lots of jobs that aren't being filled. Actually, there is a gap in the market. We're looking also at mentoring opportunities, how we break down those barriers and build up the networks in the creative industries. Work placements, really important. How do you make that first breakthrough into the sector? So how can we open up those work placements? And then, of course, looking at a Future Leaders programme as well. So we're looking at also how we enhance existing programmes like the Kickstart programme and the apprenticeship programme. But also it's, you know, we're also working with kind of people who've already started on their careers. You know, there's a lot of stuff happening in sort of mid-career opportunities. So how we're looking at Estuary Producers Network. So that's kind of developing placements and skills and development and mentoring for mid and early career producers. And then, of course, it's really important to support other things that are happening, like the Medway City of Culture bid, and looking at how the colleges are developing their education. We're working also with the LEP. We have a skills advisory, employers-led skills advisory group, and looking and talking with them about what employers need. So a whole plethora of opportunities, hopefully.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great. And we've had a couple of questions now from the audience, and I will put the first one to Lisa, and it sort of follows on from what Sarah was saying, really, which is from Keith Grimley, and he's asking to hear a bit more about your experience of building enthusiasm and engagement with younger people within Barking Dagenham and East London more broadly, in terms of the real projects that are coming out of the ground. And I suppose I'd like to then link that to a second question, which I might also put to Ken. And Ken, I thought, made a really good point around how the investment that's gone into Barking Dagenham now is a good thing for the region, and it shows that this is a growth market. I think the investment into the film studios in Dagenham was global. I think it was an American firm, studios, I believe, and I know that Ken will be actively looking at opportunities to attract inward investment into Purfleet. And so the second question is from Graham Perkins, who said that he's been in Singapore for 21 years and has just returned to live in Southend. And how are we positioning the Thames Estuary globally? And that, I suppose, then links to the inward investment question. So perhaps, Lisa, if you wanted to take that first, and then maybe Ken on your experiences on those topics.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can hear me because my thing looks like it's freezing a bit. So sorry.
No, clear.
Oh, all good. It's just freezing for me. All good, as long as you can get me in real time. So we're looking initially at a kind of a 5 program area approach to kind of embedding a kind of enthusiasm as well as real kind of sowing the seed for opportunity. So we want to do that at pre-16 level, to go into schools, to create, as part of our, we've got a creative education partnership who does some amazing work across all the primary schools and secondary schools in our borough. So it's about kind of embedding those roles that perhaps ordinarily they may not have thought of. So things like accountancy, which atypically you don't see as a creative role, but everything from accountancy to the kind of producer, director, and all the other support services around that. So it's about kind of sowing those seeds really, really early on, and all the immersive technologies, which the schools are doing some great work in kind of getting that kind of as part of their curriculum where they can, and then places that are really focused on that, such as Barking and Dagenham College, and then we're moving on to kind of 16 to 18. And that's a kind of another area that we were looking to develop. So as I think I mentioned in my slides, we've just appointed a film sector lead, and their role together with myself will be to kind of push that agenda and drive that strategy forward. And then we've got the 18 plus, so where we've got our FE colleges and working with places like UEL as well, who's got a fantastic film studies that they've got there. Places like Ravensbourne, is it Ravensbourne? I think is on the Thames Estuary production corridor as well. So looking at all of the guilds that we can sign up with to get kind of work placement opportunities, doing things on a micro level at the moment with location-based filming, like I said, with the kind of marshals and runners work, and then hopefully getting them to go on to kind of further opportunities. And then the kind of more tricky bit is the early stage career. So from the point of where we, that's an area that we definitely need to do some kind of more work on in developing. And as Sarah has mentioned, like that kind of mid-stage career, so people that want to transfer from traditional industries such as kind of carpenters, electricians, so any of those kind of rigging trade services that we can really quite easily and quite quickly transfer into the creative sector, and kind of broadening that opportunity for them. And they could be some quite quick wins that we could achieve. We were very fortunate with Hackman and MBS, as part of their bid, they put down a £1 million endowment. So that it enables us to then have that kind of funding which we can broaden across the next 3 years to push that, to kind of drive that that whole strategy forward. So having that investment solely for that particular agenda is really, really important and integral to us kind of making sure that we've got an ecosystem in readiness for when the studios are built. Hope that answers your question.
Definitely, thank you. That's great. And Ken, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, Max, very good points that Lisa just made there. I support everything that she said, because it's really important. In the global investment market at the moment, it may seem strange, but there is a wealth of money out there that's trying to find homes for its money. And there are not enough projects to invest in. It seems strange, but there aren't. And the reality is that they're looking for homes where there's a stable political environment, where there's an ambition to deliver projects, and where real projects are actually happening. So, you know, it's music to all our ears to hear about the success at Barking and Dagenham. We're doing the same at Purfleet, and others are along the Thames Estuary. So what we're doing at the Thames Estuary Growth Board, and we're well supported here with Ray and also Kate Millard, as Ray mentioned, is actually going out to make sure that the world knows that we're open for business, financial business, and that's very effective. So we're engaging. I think I've got 4 meetings with the Department of International Trade in the next week to talk about how do we actually harness investments coming from, whether or not that's from the US, whether or not it's coming from Hong Kong, wherever. And it's a really rich supply, but the challenge to us is actually telling the story. And I think today actually tells that story very well. And everyone knows that actually the creative industries is a very, very good medium for investment. Some of the big deals that are being done globally now, and you know, the investments being done by Amazon and the like, are huge. And we want to create an environment where in the Thames Estuary, people go, actually, this is the #1 place to locate. Let's come and invest in the creative industries here, because there's a really good story. And actually, we've got a partnership arrangement, and Sarah mentioned that earlier on. We all work together. We're not fighting each other. We're here working together, and we're supporting each other. And I think that's really important to investors coming into the UK. And that's for the benefit of the UK PLC as well.
Great, thanks, Ken. And that's a good point, because we haven't really touched on what is it that makes the Thames Estuary such a special place and a unique place. And that's very much also about the richness of the landscape and also the built heritage. And many people think of it as this sort of post-industrial corridor, which of course it is, but that is actually in the process of reinventing itself. And there's some great projects already underway, like in Chatham, for example, reinventing the dockyard and reusing the buildings there more creatively. So another question that's come from the audience was around the changes that have happened over the last year and a half, all of us having lived through a pandemic, and the fact that we're all now able to work from home and thinking differently about our choices about where to live, and that will have a big impact. And I know just anecdotally from people that live near me in central London, many have made radical life choices that they wouldn't have done in terms of moving to the wider southeast, and I think that will start to become a pattern. So telling that story about the quality of life that the Thames Valley had told very successfully historically, now in the Thames Estuary, I think is really key, and having that strong narrative, which I think is really coming through now. So I suppose it would be good to ask Ray and then Laura from her experience of Ebbsfleet, how, in terms of the changes that have happened in the last year and a half, and the need, I suppose, with people, their geographies closing in and living more locally, but also wanting more access to nature and also more flexible space, and the need for more sort of flexible work and home space. So not just working from home, but having somewhere in your local town centre to go and work and have a desk and a coffee, and but also mix with people from the creative industries that might be in the artist studios in the same building. It is an exciting prospect, but how do you actually make that happen? And what are the businesses looking for, Ray, from your point of view as an entrepreneur and somebody that has a number of businesses within the creative industries? And then perhaps, Laura, your experience of the interest that you've had so far in this, particularly the more advanced projects that you have. You mentioned two mixed-use buildings at an advanced stage. Yeah, but it'd be good to hear your experiences. So maybe Ray first, and then Laura.
Thank you, Max. Well, I alluded to it in the sort of highlighted presentation. From my perspective, as somebody that works in the creative industries and have done for the last 30 odd years, and there was one earlier question that one of the audience members asked regarding returning from Singapore, and, you know, how does this area compete with the rest of the world? So commercially, that's exactly what I do. Having a look at all of the wonderful projects that are underway, whether that be through the LEP or what Ken is doing or what Lisa's driving and what Laura sits on. I mentioned the fact that I have facilities dotted all over the world, and not only facilities that I manage and coordinate, but also my clients, the people that I have to have real-time, low latency, discussions with, like this on Zoom, but more importantly, very heavy data processed content, right? So all of these industries that we're talking about, creative industries, a lot of that content is digital content. Lisa referred to the data center that is built on the infrastructure in Dagenham, which is fantastic thinking, because most of the organizations I work with in the United States or in Asia have pretty significant data infrastructure connectivity. So I apologize for bringing it down to ones and zeros, but when you look at the fact that the UK is 47th on the list of global connectivity worldwide. That's an appalling statistic for a country of the size of the UK, and also it's a real blow to the aspirations for punching above our weight, as Ken referred to in terms of UK PLC. There's a lot of legacy infrastructure. So if we allow the private sector alone to be the ones that will fix all of our internet connectivity, we're all in for an extraordinarily long wait. So you've got pioneers like Lisa that is looking at, well, how does one integrate next generation connectivity with the infrastructure, the physical building, as well as what goes into those buildings? Sarah refers to all of the training that needs to go in to train the next generation up for jobs that don't exist yet, but could exist. So I'm absolute living proof of the fact that, well, digital connectivity has allowed me to not only survive during the pandemic, but thrive, you know, where my output is increased significantly. And so when Ken's looking at building out Purfleet Studios, and I'm working closely with Ken on the ideation of that and what that means in terms of what are we doing, that's very much a case of non-competing. It's not just a case of, hey, build a studio here. I'm quite closely aligned to the studio builds in Liverpool as well. Liverpool have just recently opened up a couple of new box studios, very similar to what Lisa's driving. But they're picking up work extremely quickly with the big American checkbooks. But more importantly, what they've managed to do, and it's not a secret, they've managed to pioneer a rental building business model that also drives skills training. So Netflix aren't just going to be occupying, them or Amazon or whoever, they're not just going to be occupying space, they're also going to be investing into the local education, higher education infrastructure to ensure that there's a whole cohort of students that will be getting industry-led, on-the-ground skills training in the productions that are happening in situ. So to answer your question, Max, and for the audience, what the thinking is in terms of, well, how do we cope with a post-coronavirus world? It's one of the reasons why the Growth Board in particular did focus in on, okay, we really got, because nobody had done it before at an Estuary level in terms of what is the digital infrastructure? How does Lisa's data center connect with all the other potential data centers or existing data centers? And what does that actually mean regarding jobs? What does that actually mean regarding communication? What does that actually mean in terms of productivity? All of the new jobs in that digital environment in terms of film and television and radio, all the stuff you mentioned, Max, and also music, it all exists with high data rate delivery. And that's ones and zeros infrastructure, which then absolutely bleeds across into what Ken's referring to regarding inward investment. You've got very large private equity firms, very large telecommunications organizations looking, as a result of the work that we're doing, at the estuary and thinking, wait a minute, this is an opportunity from a private sector. But we all know, as I've mentioned, if we leave it up to the private sector, or indeed if we leave it up to the public sector, never the twain shall meet. So what we're doing here is absolutely bringing those thought process together regarding new business in Purfleet, existing and growing businesses in Dagenham, and all the other, that's just film, all the other creative sector opportunities that exist. Sarah mentioned a number of them, whether that's the Turner Contemporary over in Margate, all the way through to High House Production Park, all the way through to all of the educational establishments in our region that are already delivering courses in media, in technology, in creativity, in the arts, / in engineering, computer gaming, etc. So Max, I really do feel quite confident and positive, because although the work hadn't been done, we've now got that work. And as you can tell by this panel, we're stitching it all together. You know, how does what Lisa is doing affect what Ken is doing? How do they not compete? Because there's no reason to compete. There's plenty of work on a global level. If we're on a level playing field, and in fact punching above our weight from a connectivity perspective, it allows me, for instance, as somebody not just on this panel talking to you, but as somebody that makes my living on working globally and being able to do that because I've got a digital infrastructure that can support that. And that absolutely speaks to skills training. A lot of what I do is, work with students and cohorts at multiple levels and bring them into projects that I work on, giving them real world not just skills, but also real world salaries, because at the end of the day, this is about jobs, and this is about employment, and this is about, it bleeds directly into place building. What are the places that this new generation of workforce, where do they want to live? Max, you referred to it in terms of people moving out of London. That's very much what our agenda is, and making those places across the estuary and interlinking them so that they can achieve more, at their doorstep than they can traveling 20, 30, 40, 1 hour, 1.5 hour into central London. I hope that gives you a bit of a grounding in terms of an answer there.
Absolutely. No, that's great, Ray. And having that sort of broader definition of infrastructure, I think, is really important. It's not just about transport, although that's important, and connectivity across the river is important as we go further east. But it's about the social infrastructure and enabling that social mobility and addressing the structural inequalities and giving the opportunities to the more disadvantaged members of the communities in Kent and Essex, not just the people that are moving there from elsewhere, the people that are already there, that are giving them the ladder and the opportunities. And the digital infrastructure, I think, is really important. But so perhaps, Laura, if you wanted to just tell us a bit about your experiences so far at Ebbsfleet and the type of interest and the demand that you're getting and how that's having a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting time for us at Ebbsfleet because we are on the cusp of bringing forward a whole range of new buildings, both commercial and community buildings and spaces. And actually the pandemic, in a strange way, is sort of slightly beneficial in that it's kind of allowing us to stop and think, well, actually, what does the future of work look like? And what do we need to provide for people to have a really good quality of life and have a range of things on their doorstep? So we're also, because we've taken the approach that we want to co-design all of our buildings and spaces, we're having lots of conversations, both with creative professionals who are potentially looking for space, but also in the neighbourhood. We did a survey during lockdown to get a better understanding of how people were feeling, what kind of things they needed. And we're in the middle of doing a business survey as well to understand, locally what is needed. And people are coming back really, saying, yes, they really would like to have co-working spaces locally, touchdown spaces, but they want a combination of private and sort of open shared spaces, so open shared spaces so that they can collaborate, they can work locally, they can meet like-minded people and work together. But there's also, we're finding still a need for people to have private closed spaces, whether that be studios, rehearsal spaces, those sorts of things. So, and interesting also, lockdown has meant that, developers are having to look at the way they design houses as well, because there's been a real trend for years about having open plan spaces in your houses, so your whole ground floor is like this lovely open plan space where you eat and cook and socialize together. But now people are saying, well, actually that's not worked for me during lockdown because I have no private space. And so it's an opportunity to look at the way we're designing houses as well. But yeah, so we're looking at a sort of cluster of buildings at the moment, a new sort of community arts building in Castle Hill, a really large scale hub in Alcaden, which is one of the new villages in what used to be called the Eastern Quarry, so the next quarry along from Bluewater. And we're looking at, that's a really good example of where we're looking at what does cultural co-location mean. We've got a building that's got some 106 provision that's got to go in it. That's what the developer's got to bring forward. So things like library, lifelong learning, some health and well-being. So how can we co-locate some cultural facilities with those things and really blur the boundaries between those things as well. So for that building in particular, we have got quite a lot of interest from music organisations, both sort of more traditional music, as in instruments, singing, etc., but also music tech and education. And so we're really looking at, well, how can those work really well with that lifelong learning offer that's also going to be in that building, and how can we blend that with maybe like youth services that might operate in that building, and therefore creating this really vibrant cluster within a building of creative professionals and people who who live locally, who want a great space to go and hang out in, or they want to do a course in music tech or those sorts of things. So it's a really exciting time at Estuary, and we're also it might be worth mentioning now that our Garden City Trust model is really about developing a sustainable model that works for the creative sector. What we don't want is for the creative, we want to encourage the creative sector to come and work here, but we don't want them to find themselves then priced out of the area as soon as they've arrived. So we want to create a model where it remains affordable, both for the creative sector or for startups, freelancers, small businesses, so having those spaces where those people can come together regularly, but at an affordable level, is really, really fundamental to what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Laura. And I know we've already extended the time. Everyone will already be aware of that, because we're going on until 11, but that's only about 5 minutes or so. So we've probably got time for just a couple more questions. And I would probably put the first one to Ken, and then maybe we'll finish with Sarah to sort of do a bit of a wrap up and take a bit of a broader view. So Ken, one of the questions here from Emma Wilcox, the Creative Estuary Director, is around, and I think particularly relevant given the audience today, how we are taking developers and investors with us on this journey, and how you're doing that and how others are doing that, and perhaps that's a kind of opportunity for you to explain what the investment opportunity is, and then maybe also just connected to that, there was a question around, as well as film studios as an anchor, might there be any plans to create a new major live music and events venue for the existing and future community, which is an interesting question. So perhaps, Ken, if you wanted to touch on that, and just in a couple of minutes, and then hand over to Sarah. And Sarah, there was a question about having a more sort of joined up plan across the boroughs, and what's the sort of creative thread that weaves through the whole region, which obviously the Creative Estuary is driving forwards. But also then there's a question from James Mark, which is about how are we making the arts and culture more accessible to everybody within this region, and in reality on the ground, what's happening, and maybe a bit about the Estuary Festival and what's happened so far and what we can still look forward to. So Ken, over to you.
I'll start off. So I think we're creating a wonderful environment for developers to move forward in, and that's what we're doing in the Thames Estuary Growth Board, is actually creating an environment where investors will come to the table. The reality is, unless the investment's there, the money's there, the developers won't deliver. But the developers also need to see an environment where planning is supported, and we're doing that collectively along the Thames Estuary, working with Sarah and her team. That's happening on a significant scale. We also need to educate the developers that actually quality developments isn't just about putting houses up. And I actually totally endorse what Laura says. We need to be building more houses so that we actually get affordable housing. That's really important for the industry. Totally agree with that. And that will be done by building more houses. But we have to educate people. It's not just about building houses. It's about building the mixed communities, the mixed use, the education, the health, the jobs and resources. And that's the process that we're now undertaking on the Thames Estuary Growth Board to deliver that environment and that framework that will bring investment in, but also at the same time show that the developers that if you deliver the type of projects that we're talking about today, you will get your money through the door. And that's always a good starter.
Great, Ken, thank you. And Sarah, do you want to just try and do a bit of a wrap up there and maybe touch on that sort of more strategic question about being joined up in the boroughs and what's happening with the festival and arts and culture?
Thanks. Yeah, so I'll do the arts and culture bit first, and then the sort of how we're all joining up. So if you haven't looked, there is this amazing website, estuaryfestival.com, which has all of the details of all of the events. And actually, there's also a lot of recorded events that took place online and are still taking place online. So if you can't actually get there, then there's still lots you can do and see and be part of. And I think in terms of, how we are opening up the arts and culture to people, I think, you've heard from Laura some of the things that they're doing in Estuary, but also actually there's we're putting work in public spaces. So you'll see artwork across the Thames Estuary area. And that, I really love and am passionate about that kind of serendipitous encounter that you might have with work as you're walking around a place that kind of opens up your eyes to those places and spaces. So that's sort of a bit of a look at estuaryfestival.com. Look at Ebbsfleet. They're doing events all the time, and I'm sure Lisa is in Barkingham, Dagenham, and generally around. And how we're joining it up? Well, we have the Thames Estuary Production Corridor. We've got a partnership group that is informal at the moment that I'm co-chair of with the GLA, Shona at the GLA. So the London boroughs are all welcome to come and join that. If they'd like to get involved, be very welcome. Just email one of us. And then sort of finally, in terms of sort of how I'd like to sum up a bit of today is come and join us. This is a really strong movement now. Invest. Talk to us, look at Creative Estuary website. There'll be ways of communicating with us through that. But please, and then talk about us, because it's a brand that is global, that can be global, and we're looking for ongoing global investment in the area. So do come and join us. It is partnership and ambition at its heart.
Thanks, Sarah. And I don't know if we might have 30 seconds, you could touch on the live music venue. Is there any sort of rumblings of or plans or talk about that at all?
Not one that I've heard of at the moment. But I mean, again, that's sort of why I say come and join us, because actually you might know something, Max, but...
Well, Ray, I think, has messaged.
Sure. Again, this is only one example, and this is a straight answer to the straight question. But it isn't just about, for instance, we talked a lot about film and television and place generation, but this is across the entire creative industry. So the answer to your question about, is there any discussion on about live music venues? Absolutely. I could name 3 off the top of my head right now, beyond what it is that Ken's doing. You've got the work that's going into the London Resort. There are already existing venues. Let me be clear about that. Existing venues across the creative estuary who are also repurposing in a post-coronavirus world. So the music sector has been hit, venues have been hit, but they are pivoting. And there's a lot of work going on there. So I do want to underscore, yes, we focused in on film because it's very big, it's shiny and sexy and wonderful. But it's not just that. It's a sector, obviously, I work in very closely, and there's a lot of dynamism. And I hope that what Sarah's saying comes across, that the door is open to bring in people to help us build this as we go.
Very good to hear, Ray. Thank you. And maybe I'll now hand back to Lee just to wrap up. It's just gone 11, so over to you, Lee.
Thank you so much. All perfect timing, Max. Thank you so much for your great chairing, and thank you to all of you. I have to say, personally, this has been one of my favourite events since we started doing virtual events. I'm absolutely inspired. I love the fact you're using the word, ambition all the time. You're all excited. You're all completely passionate, and I think it's a brilliant example of partnership. You know, we set out this year looking at collaboration, private and public sector engagement, realizing that, you know, this has to be better for the future. And, you know, this is an exemplar of that, and I love it. And I think, yes, you know, a drive, let's get more people involved with you guys. I love accessibility for all. I think, you know, that really came across in everything you said. You know, this is for everybody. This is, you know, to generate new talent, the up and coming talent, but then also early career, mid career. You know, everyone can get involved, everybody can start, you know, across the creative industry. And, you know, this whole cultural co-location, it's, you know, that the buzzwords hadn't been around before, but I think you're right. In a post-pandemic world, you know, people are realizing the importance of art and culture on livability, on well-being. And I just think it's really, really exciting. So, you know, congratulations to all of you for your, you know, immense work in this area. And Movers and Shakers, you know, will definitely support what you're doing, and let's carry on all these conversations and get the message out. But no, absolutely loved it. Loved all your slides. Brilliant. Thank you so much to all of you. So thank you. Have a great day. And I'm just going to mention our next event to our audience, if I may. So our next event with Movers and Shakers virtually is June the 24th. And it'll be on building back to business. We're going to do a number of city focus events in the West Midlands and in the Southwest. So on June the 24th, we're having our event on Coventry. And then the following week, we'll be having one on Birmingham. But also, we've just launched our Build to Rent Forum London, which is always hugely popular. This year, it's fully virtual on the 29th and the 30th of June. So please do go on our website and on the Build to Rent website, have a look. It's not just a conference. We're actually launching a whole community. So this is going to be ongoing. And when you come to the conference, you're going to have access to 12 months on the community. So we'll be able to carry on the dialogue after the event, and also we'll be having some smaller niche events following that. So thank you so much. Do look that up. But I hope you're all as inspired as I was this morning, hearing from our great contributors. Thank you very much. Have a really good day from our family to yours. Thank you.